So, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here once more, and I'd like to talk a little bit about Germany, German economy, and the economic tradition in Germany, and where we are at the moment, and what are the challenges from the economic side of view. First of all, I will start what is one of the, from my point of view, key elements of the economic success historically in Germany. I think it's the highly qualified and motivated workforce we have in Germany. And why do we have this workforce if you compare it to other regions in the world or even in Europe? I think one key element is that we have the so-called Protestant work ethic. And that dates back about 100 years ago. And instead of the fact that in Germany we have more or less half of the population traditionally, historically, was Catholic. And in Catholic, if you look to Spain or look to Italy and the more or less the Roman countries, we have ora et labora, that means working and praying. But in the Protestant background, working is praying. That's more or less one of the roots of this Protestant working ethic. And that is, from my point of view, one of the reasons of this economic success, because we have highly motivated and highly disciplined workforce. And out of this history, we have a tradition that we have a job-related education. In a lot of countries in the world, you go to high school and you don't have more, and then to the university, and there is no exchange with the industry or no exchange with the crafts or the so-called Mittelstand in Germany. And that's also one of the key success factors, that we have more or less a dual education system, that you go to school and you get trained on this job in the industry, in the factory, in the service economy. And we have a fully developed infrastructure in terms of the so-called gray infrastructure. That means we have streets, we have railways, we have airports, but we also have a green infrastructure. That means we have sustainable, how do you call it, and lovely land where you can have your leisure activities, and we have also, thank you, a lot of cultural possibilities. And this mixture makes it quite successful to have this workforce. So then we have the tradition of a so-called social partnership. That means in Germany we have a tradition that the employers and the workforce are not only working together, so they have a social, economic, and institutional system which is not government-based. So the negotiations between these both sides are independent from government. And that leads, for example, to the situation that we have compared to a lot of countries in the world. It's avoiding strikes, and it gives for the employees reliability and social security. And so they are more motivated even in dire straits if you have crisis or things like that. And that's one of the core elements of the so-called social market economy. And this leads to high labor productivity, and this is one more factor or one more element of our economic success story in the history, and it's still true today, and it's, I think, also important for the future as well. Then we have a quite reliable legal system, so that if you are investing in Germany or if you are inventing something, you can keep your intellectual property, and if there is a case on the court, it doesn't take 10 years to be solved, so that you have a legal environment, a legal framework, which makes it possible not only for large companies, also for small and medium-sized companies to be successful. That's also one of our basic elements. And then we have in Germany still an industrial core combined with industry-related services. If you look back 15, 20 years, we had the discussion of new economy and old economy. And in a lot of countries, if you look to Britain, for example, Britain was the home of the industrialization in Europe. But if you look today to Britain, Britain has more or less lost its industrial competence. And in Germany, we still have about 20% of our gross national product is industry-based. And at the end of the 90s, there was a discussion that this is not good. We should move or switch more to service, financial services, and other things like that. But then, when the first new economic crisis was, and then the second crisis in 2008, 2009, everybody, and also we in Germany, realized that it's still good to have this industrial core combined with this industry-related service. And this makes it possible that we are diversified in a lot of sectors, and we can also export a lot. And that's also one of the key elements of the German economy in the last 40 years, that we have an export-driven economy. And first, we exported a lot of goods only in Europe or to US, and today we are fortunately able to bring our goods, products, and services all around the world, so that we can diversify. And if we look to the crisis in 2008, 2009, at this time, the demand in Europe, for example, was shrinking by 20–30%, and the German economy was able to balance this to export more, for example, to the emerging economies in China or in the ASEAN states or to the BRIC countries at this time. And so even in the crisis, the German export was growing, and today Germany is, we are only 80 million people compared to more than 300 million people in US or 1.3 billion in China. Germany is not only in relative terms, also in absolute terms, in the last year number one in exporting country in the world. And we are exporting mostly products which are related to this industrial core, cars, machineries, and things like this. And that brings me to another pillar of the German economic success. That's the so-called German Mittelstand. That's a word even now it's understood all around the world. We have a lot of small and medium-sized companies with dozens of employees or hundreds, several hundreds, and more than 99% of our companies in Germany belong to the Mittelstand, and about 55% of the GDP is coming from this Mittelstand, and more than 80% of the trainees and the apprentices, the people who are educated on this dual economy, on this dual education system I mentioned already, are also coming from this Mittelstand. And that makes it possible that if you look, there was a survey which looked what are the global market leaders worldwide, and it identified 2,700, more or less, 2,710 so-called hidden champions, and 1,307 out of these 2,700, that means almost 50% of these hidden champions are coming from small Germany, and only 366 from US, and from China 68, and from Great Britain, which is next, 67. And that's also one of our key pillars. Not only all the companies you know, maybe Mercedes or BMW or Bosch or Siemens, they are important, but the real success story is in the German Mittelstand, and we have to keep this. If I come to my constituency, this was already mentioned, is the region of Stuttgart. In my electoral district, for example, there are a couple of world market leaders out of several different sectors, even you know probably. For example, in my constituency is the company Stihl, which makes the motor saws, and more than 1/3 of every motor saw in the world is coming from Stihl. Or we have, for example, Karcher. You've heard that with the cleaning companies, and are both companies, they were founded about 70, 80 years ago from one guy, and today they have about 10,000 people working for them. They make 5-6 billion euros turnover, and they export 90% of their value of their products all around the world. And so there are a lot of companies, for example, for gas valve, for Dunks, we will probably not know, or in the packaging sector. So that makes us very quick, very innovative, and also diversified in the sectors, and that's I think is also one of the success factors. So, but not only the positive things to mention, there are also a lot of challenges for Germany and the German economy. To keep the innovation in progress, more or less, we try also from the political side to bring more money and more brain to research and development. Unfortunately, even in the crisis, we have increased the federal budget for education and for research, for example, from 2005 to 2015. Within 10 years, we more than doubled the budget from 7.5 billion euros a year to almost 17 billion euros a year. And today we have about 3% of our GDP for research and development. And that's fortunately one of the best figures we have in the world. And if you look, for example, to the global patent ranking, we have the first two First in the world is Bosch, you know, and the second one is Schaeffler. It's also an automotive and machinery related German company, which is very innovative. And then on the third place is the American company Ford. So that is one of our challenges, to keep this innovation circle and to keep this on track, that we will be able to manage the challenges for the future. And what are the challenges? Just to mention a few at the end. I saw that you had yesterday a colleague talking about the digitalization. I think that's really one of the key challenges we are faced. Digitalization in terms that we have, especially for our Mittelstand and for our industrial core competences, we have to connect them to the internet and to the digital change. The word is Industrie 4.0. It's also a phrase, obviously, is taken over in US and other countries from the German language. I think that's one of the key challenges, and we have to bring this digitalization to our automotive industry, to our machinery industry, to be competitive in the future anymore, because there will be changes. If you look to the mobility sector, for example, what will be the future for electromobility and other things, and these are huge challenges we are faced. I think you heard yesterday from my colleague Marion Wendt something about this. That's one of the challenges. The second one is the transformation of our energy system. Germany has, as far as I know at least, the most ambitious goals worldwide on energy. We want to decarbonize the industry as far as it's possible and decarbonize the energy production. In 2050, we want to have 90% less CO2 emissions. We want to increase energy efficiency by 50% to 2050. That means producing the same amount of GDP with only 50% of the energy input. And last but not least, that energy production which is left over then should be coming almost completely from renewable energy. And that's really also a large challenge, especially from the coast side. And then related to the internet and the digitalization, I see a challenge which is upcoming in the last years, and that's cybercrime. Germany was in the last year the country in the world which was most affected by cybercrime. We lost last year 1.6% of our GDP. That was the annual growth rate. That means we lost our whole growth in the last year to cybercrime. And we also have to find answers on this, especially again for the Mittelstand, which has a lot of IP, and this IP has to be kept and secured, and that's also a huge challenge. Then we have to improve our startup culture. Here in Berlin, maybe you had the chance to visit or to see, in the last years there was a quite good development and environment for startups, but compared, for example, to US or to other countries, we are still lacking far behind in terms of starting new businesses. And if you look what are the global leaders in a lot of sectors, Germany is good in machinery, in automotive, I told you, or Siemens in traditional sectors, but if you look to new appliances and to new developments, then you look to Silicon Valley or to a lot of US, there are a lot of companies not from Europe and not from Germany, and so we have to improve the environment for the startup culture. And last but not least, at present today, the major discussion and political challenge is the refugee challenge, and we have to integrate these refugees. In the last year, we had more than 1 million people coming to Germany to the labor market and to integrate it in our society. And that's heavily debated at the moment politically and in the society. So we have pride and rich historic development where we can base our future success, but nothing is for sure, and if you're not getting better every day, you will not be at the top anymore in 5 years or in 10 years. And so we have to work on these challenges, that we have the chance, and I'm convinced that Germany has also the chance for a bright future economically, but not on its own alone. I think we the future critical mass of competition is to join forces in Europe, and that's also one of the challenges we are faced at the moment, that we have on the one hand side a lot of people on the political and the economic side and the media working for a deeper integration of Europe, but we see that we have on the other side a lot of problems in Europe. If you look to the discussion about the Brexit, if you look to Catalonia, if you look to other things, so that's also a challenge. But I'm deeply convinced Germany alone is not has not anymore the critical mass. We need a Europe in a united Europe, economically as well as politically. And if we act to the challenges in the Near and Middle East or in Africa, we also can do this only with a European answer and not with a national answer. But I'm convinced that Germany will be able to manage this and can also be one of the driving forces for and in Europe. So that's, from my point of view, a few thoughts on the branding, historical branding, and today's situation and future challenges of Germany. Thanks for your attention, and if there are any questions, it would be a pleasure to answer it, but unfortunately I have to leave in 5 minutes for my next appointment, so it's only possible to maybe for 1 or 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pfeiffer. I'm sure there's questions and comments. I have a member of parliament here with us. Let's start, collect 1 or 2 at the same time in order to allow as many voices as possible. And please introduce yourself as well for Dr. Pfeiffer.
Hello, my name is Linda. I am from Kenya. I'm a student here at ICD for a master's program. Now, I just heard you mention something about innovating and coming up with solutions to facilitate the startup culture, and I'm wondering what policies have been put in place to facilitate that and to change that. What is the German Bundestag talking about as far as startups is concerned? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's I can't give you an easy answer because this problem is not new. It's we see in the last centuries that the startup culture in Germany compared to others is not so high, and the reason is, or one of the reasons is what I mentioned before, that we have a very good social security system, and if you can work in a small or medium-sized company or in a large company with a very good salary and with more or less a job guarantee for a lot of years, so you are not forced to do it, to do your own business. And if when the economic times are bad, then normally you have more startups, and so it's the other side of the medal. If you have a good and sustainable development, then on the other side, people normally are not tending to do it. So that's one of the reasons. And the second is it's a cultural background. If you fail in Germany and you start a company, then it's then if you talk to your family or your friends or in the society, then it's more or less a malus, yeah. And if you do the same in US, then you say, okay, I start a second one and I will avoid the mistakes I make with the first ones. And that it's a question which is in cultural or in the mind. And you can't change it by law. Yeah? So you have to discuss this, and you have to find or create an environment where there is the chance for cultural change or cultural development, and that's quite difficult. But we try to work on this, and we try to assist or promote the startup business with better regulation. So the better access to financing startups, or to make or implement some regulation benefits to make it easier to start up a business and things like that. So we try to have a couple of instruments, but it's hard work to do and a long way to go. But if you don't start, you will not succeed.
Hi, I'm Naomi. I'm from the UK, so I'd be very interested to hear a German perspective on the consequences of a Brexit, both economically, what would the consequences be for the European Union, and what are the benefits of the UK staying in the European Union from a German perspective?
I think Brexit would have negative effects for Europe, and it would have also negative effects for Great Britain as well. Because Britain with 60 million people and also with a liberal, market-orientated economic tradition, if Britain would exit the European Union, the balance would shift more to southern Europe, which is more state-oriented and less market-oriented, and that would be negative, from my point of view at least, would have negative effects for the European economy. And for Britain, it would also have negative effects, I think. If you look to the financial center, London, already it is discussed when it's leaving the European market, and that's the economic pillar. But I think we should not only look to the economic pillar. I'm already mentioned, I'm deeply convinced the US is not able or is not willing anymore to play the role it played the last 50, 60 years in the world. So we have to secure, to look to our neighboring areas or regions. If you look around today to Ukraine, if you look out to the Near and Middle East, or look out to the challenges which are in Africa, we need a European answer, and we have to join forces. And if Britain is not participating, the power of Europe and the weight of Europe would not be the same. And Britain itself is also not anymore the empire it was 100 years ago. And so I think it would be better for both sides to keep together. And if you look to Britain, I think, I'm not the expert on this, but I fear, and then you have the discussions in Scotland again, and you have discussions maybe in Wales. And if you have a dissolution of Great Britain, then I think that doesn't help also not Europe and Great Britain. So thanks a lot. Unfortunately, I have to leave. I wish you the best and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pfeiffer.